Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and you are listening to My Strategy. We're very happy to be here with you today. We are live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. In this show, we're going to be talking about choking under pressure. I'm going to talk about how talented people are not able to perform under pressure. We're going to talk a little bit about how this is actually a reflection of what our values are. And we're also going to talk about how to cope with a sudden loss of confidence and give you tips and tricks to help you rebuild your confidence. We're very glad to be here with you today. You're listening to My Strategy. My Strategy is a show about personal development, and we choose Saturday to reflect on our goals and strategies. For me, it's a great day of the week, but just keep in mind that any day of the week is a great day for you to reflect on your strategy. Now, our show continues to grow. We're available on iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker. We are also recording the shows, and they are available on YouTube as well. So it's in the audio format and also in the video format on YouTube. You can find me on most social platforms. My Twitter handle is HawkinsJohn. My website is johnmhawkins.com. And just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and plan to help us reach our goals, because the best laid plans don't always work. Now, this week, I'm looking for stories on situations where you may have had an issue with performance or choking, as we can call it. Do you have any good examples, a tip or a trick? If you do, send it to talk@johnmhawkins.com, and you can be entered into our weekly giveaway. In our weekly giveaway, you get a copy of my latest book, Coach to Greatness, and we will also throw in a $25 Visa gift card. Well, we're talking about choking under pressure. Today, we're going to be talking about things that relate to don't choke. Talk a little bit about Lolo Jones, who was an Olympian who ended up choking under pressure. Was it anxiety, tension? Was she afraid of losing? What about coping with a sudden loss of confidence? Being self-conscious, self-confident, feeling anxious. Strong feelings aren't necessarily your enemy. Talk a little bit about emotions and a false alarm, a true alarm, or is it a mixture, and how we should be looking and interpreting those emotions? I'm going to go into 13 secrets to help you perform well under pressure. And the fact is, nobody performs well under pressure. Think of high pressure as a fun challenge, not as a life or death situation. Try focusing on the task, not the outcomes. We're going to go into some of those. We're then going to talk a little bit about why do some thrive and others wither under stress. And resiliency can help us bounce back from tragedy or those types of situations. We'll then talk a little bit about the career resilience and how your ability to go with the flow in an ever-changing environment can actually help you be more wanted by employers. I'll start off here with an article that's in a health magazine called Don't Choke: What We Value Affects How We Perform Under Pressure. The author is Olga Kazan. It says here, 10 seconds into the race, Lolo Jones had pulled far ahead of her competition at the women's 100-meter hurdles finals during the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. What happened next was, for Jones and fans, heartbreaking to watch. After effortlessly flying over 8 hurdles, Jones clipped the 9th with her right heel, knocking it over and shaking her off balance. Her rival, American Dawn Harper, took home the gold medal. Jones placed 7th. Crossing the finish line, Jones hung her head. A photographer captured her doubled over, pounding the track with her fist. She says, I really just put too much pressure on myself, she later told the New York Times. That gets at the theory of choking. Scientists have long thought of the painful oof moments that are what happens when anxiety and tension cause people to overthink something that should come easily. Rumination far from making movements more intentional, can sometimes make them clumsier. So it says here, while it may seem counterintuitive, if you consciously try to keep your balance, it can actually produce imbalance. This is according to Jürgen Beckman, who's a sports psychologist from the Technical University of Munich. He said this was as seen in some subpar performances by gymnastics during the Olympics in London. But a new study published in the Journal of Neuroscience highlights yet another psychological process that might be unfolding when people choke. How you perform under pressure, the researcher found, depends on how afraid you are of losing what you have. For the experiment, researchers from Johns Hopkins and the Kennedy Krieger Institute invited 26 participants to play a simple video game that involved moving some dots into squares using the computer cursor. The participants spent the first day learning the game. The second day, they modified the game to match each person's ability so that it was equally difficult for each participant. Then they tried to gauge how loss-averse the participants were by asking them to perform coin toss gambles for varying amounts of money, such as if the coin toss would determine your chance of winning $4 or losing $2. Would you take the gamble? Most people value losses twice as much as the gains. I think that's an important point. Most people value the losses twice as much as the gains. Lead study author Vikram Chib, a biomedical engineering professor at Hawkins, told him, people who would only be willing to lose $5 if they stood to gain $100, for example, are extremely loss averse. Then they asked the participants to play the game again. Only this time, the subject stood to either gain up to 100 or lose up to 100. What they found was people who were very loss averse, very afraid of forfeiting their money, did better when they were threatened with losing greater amounts. They choked, however, when they were offered a $100 reward. I think that's an interesting point. Are we scared of losing what we have, or are we seeking to gain? And the fact that, here perhaps Lolo Jones was scared of losing her title. She was not feeling confident. And even though she's one of the most, well-trained athletes in the world, in that situation, she wasn't able to perform. So was it that she really held it in such high value and such high esteem that she wanted to do it? Or was it that she was so scared of losing and started to focus on the technical nature of what she was doing that she let it get to her performance? And I think, from a choking perspective, we all have opportunities in life where we do choke from time to time. And the goal really is for us to try and figure out, how do we go about setting ourselves up for success? You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about coping with the sudden loss of confidence. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and you are listening to My Strategy. Today we're talking about choking under pressure, talking about when talented people are not able to perform under pressure. Talking a little bit about how that is a implication to what we value most and how that can impact our performance. We're also going to talk a little bit about sudden loss of confidence, and we're talking about tips to help you rebuild your confidence. Right before the break, we were talking about Lolo Jones, who was an Olympic athlete who ran into a situation where she choked under pressure. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about coping with sudden loss of confidence. Is it that self-confident feeling versus a feeling of anxiety? What about strong feelings? So is that what causes it? Should you let your emotions in the way? Turns out they might not be your enemy. We're also going to talk a little bit about emotions as a false alarm, a true alarm, or a mixture, and how we should start thinking about interpreting them. I've got an article here by Alice Boyds, PhD. It's called How to Cope with a Sudden Loss in Confidence. It says here, people commonly talk about low self-esteem, but less is said about fluctuating self-esteem. Many people, herself included, flit between feeling responsibly self-confident and feeling anxious. Here are some practical, straightforward tips for coping with swings in your confidence. It says here, strong feelings are not your enemy. Strong emotions are part of our evolved warning system. All emotions have a positive, productive reason for being part of our human repertoire. The system sometimes gets miscalibrated, as in the case of panic attacks or depression. However, fundamentally, your emotions exist to help guide you. Some good tips there. Sometimes, you have an emotion that comes up, you're impelled or compelled to do one thing, then that might not be the best way to go. I think it's important for us to understand, as she has said here, that these are our natural warning systems and learn to interpret them as such. Are your emotions a false alarm, a true alarm, or a mixture? When people experience a sudden loss of confidence, sometimes there's a valid reason behind it. For example, you're nearing completion of a high-stakes project, you're approaching a deadline, and you are behind, or you're venturing into a new realm. We're largely designed to react to any kind of uncertainty or mixed signals with anxiety. Let's say that you get feedback of an idea, and 9 reactions are mildly positive, and 1 is negative. She says here that negative response is likely going to rock you disproportionately. This is actually helpful overall, but not in every specific instance. We're designed to find signals and potential. Physical or social danger is difficult to ignore, and I think that's a good point here. When it comes time to your emotions, especially when you're doing something creative, writing a book, singing a song, whatever it is you're doing, and you get negative reactions, that can really keep you from going down your course. I remember when I published my first book and had it out on the shelves, and I got mostly positive feedback. And then I got a negative feedback from somebody in UK who said that there was a key topic that I did not include in my book. And that was something that should have been included, and it was an oversight on my part. Well, I can tell you that that negative response did impact me greater than all the positive feedback I had gotten. So I think it's important to put these things in perspective. It's okay for us as humans to do something and not do it 100%, do something and fail. I think it's important, though, for us to realize that that is how we learn, and that is how we are going to get stronger and better at what we do. Continuing here, it says here, recognizing a mixed alarm can help stop you catastrophizing. I don't think I said that one right. Often, when I feel a sudden loss of confidence, it's a sign I need to prioritize better or step back and see the big picture. It's usually an intuitive signal that sometimes what I'm doing isn't quite right. However, sometimes I need to remind myself that it's not a sign I'm completely useless or that whatever I'm doing is destined to be a disaster. Another tip she gives is do something productive. People's responses to losing confidence usually fall into the broad categories of freeze, crying, or avoiding, flight, denial of the problem, task switching, or fight. They work harder, argue, and get defensive. Which is your dominant style? And I want to reflect on this for a moment because as we're all starting to work on our ability to not choke as much, what is our default mechanism here? Do we freeze? Either get emotional, cry, avoid what we're doing? Is there a flight where we deny the problem and just move on to something else? Or do we fight and start working harder, arguing, and get defensive? I'm going to have to look into this a little bit because I'm not really sure what my dominant style is, and I'm sure there's a test out there that I could take to help me figure it out. I would say that I probably rotate between them. There's some things I deprioritize but get back to them. So that's task switching. Do I fight? Sometimes I do. Yeah, I come back and work harder. And I don't think I've frozen. Maybe I have. So most likely, many of us provide a combination of those responses. But it'd be interesting to know how you do respond so that when you are put into a situation and you feel that emotion coming on, you have the ability to say, wait a minute, I know that my natural tendency is to freeze. And as a result of that, here is something I can do to help overcome it. And we're always going to be put into situations where we're unconfident, where we can feel paralyzed. And a lot of times it has to do when we're doing something new or something that we're not confident doing. We might not be skilled at doing it, and as a result, trying to do something with other skilled people can be humiliating in a sense. And as a result of that, we can feel like we are not able to perform, and we might just switch the tasks altogether. So a lot of good information here, I think, with regard to, how we look at performance and when we lose our confidence. Not anyone is confident 100% of the time. Most of us have situations where we have esteem, low self-esteem, and high self-esteem. But I would say that we probably fluctuate. And depending on the day, you may have high self-esteem or low self-esteem. Depending on the activity you're doing, the feedback, that can also impact you. But just know that it is a natural system, and the better you know about it, the better you're going to be able to deal with those situations. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about 13 secrets to help you perform well under pressure. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Very happy to be here with you today. Today we're talking about choking under pressure, talking about how talented people are not able to perform under pressure, and we're trying to get to the bottom of why they are not able to do so. Right before the break, we were talking about coping with a sudden loss in confidence. We all, from time to time, lose our self-esteem, are not as confident as we should be, and what are some tips for us to deal with that? In this segment, I want to talk about 13 secrets to performing well under pressure. It says here, nobody performs well under pressure. Think of high pressure as fun. A fun challenge, not as a life and death decision, and focus on the task, not the outcome. 13 Secrets to Performing Well Under Pressure is an article written by Rachel Sugar. She says, before you reach for the stress ball, try employing these tactics. She says, let's get this out of the way right now. Nobody performs well under pressure. A lot of us think we do, but we don't. Or at least we don't perform as well as we could perform. She says we may feel more creative when we're under the gun, but it's a feeling and it's not the reality. It's true that you might be more productive, but the products you create are usually worse. It's interesting. That kind of ties into the show we did on inspiration and how the inspired person's work was better than the person who was working towards a schedule. Maybe there's something here. She goes on to say, in a new book, Performing Under Pressure, The Science of Doing Your Best When It Matters Most, Henry Weisinger and J.P. Pollingfry deliver the sad truth. And here's the sad truth. The difference between regular people and ultra-successful people is not that the latter group thrives under pressure. It's that they are better able to mitigate its negative effects. Say that again. The difference between regular people and ultra-successful people is not that the latter group thrives under pressure. It's that they're better able to mitigate the negative effects. She says, or maybe that's good news, because as they laid out in the book, handling pressure is a skill and you can learn it. In the book, they offer 22 tactics for doing your best when the heat is on. We took a deep breath and picked out 13 of our favorites. I think this is an important point here that they provided, saying that it is a skill, because I do believe it is a skill. Practice makes perfect. Is that correct? Or is it perfect practice makes perfect? And I think the perfect practice makes perfect does better than practice makes perfect. So too, when we're going through and trying to perfect our arts, we need to be practicing and doing perfect practice so that we are skilled. The more skilled we are, the more confident we're going to be. One of her tips is, think of high-pressure moments as a fun challenge, not life or death. Most people see pressure situations as threatening, and that makes them perform even less well. Seeing pressure as a threat undermines your self-confidence, elicits fears of failure, impairs your short-term memory, attention, and judgment, and spurs impulsive behavior. This is according to Weisinger and Pollingfry. They wrote, it saps your energy. Another tip she gives is remind yourself that this is just one of many opportunities. Well, I like where this is going. It is a high-pressure situation a good opportunity? Sure. It is the only opportunity, but is it the only opportunity you will ever have for the rest of your life? Probably not. One example that this reminds me of is when you are looking for a job. A lot of times they'll say, go to any interview. It doesn't matter what the position's for, because the practice of going through the interview process is going to make you more confident. I recently experienced that. We were working on a search committee for a principal for a school, and this principal, had gone out and done interviews with multiple different schools. Well, by the time she came to the school, that she wanted to work at, her interview was flawless. My sense is that the practice of going to the other interviews gave her the confidence that she needed to excel when it came time to interviewing at the school she wanted. So if you've got that dream job, that dream opportunity, and you have not had any practice in interviewing, and then you go out for it, and you do not get the job, or you feel nervous or not confident, and that shows in the interview, and you don't get it, that might give you some tips for next time. You always want to be out there performing. Another good advice that I got from a coworker years and years and years ago, well, maybe not too many years and years, but years and years ago, was that if you're in a meeting or going to any meeting, no matter who is supposed to be presenting, you should always be ready to present. Things happen. People don't show up, and somebody is going to come in and need to take charge of the meeting. And if you've had that preparation and you're ready to go, you're going to stand up and be able to take over the meeting, or presentation, even though it wasn't your presentation. So preparation always is something that can help you. Next one, she says, let's plan for the worst. What if scenarios can be your friend? By letting yourself play out the worst case outcomes, they say that you're able to brace yourself for them. The what if scenarios are, if I'm in a situation and something happens, what do I do? And those what if situations are extremely powerful. And they're things that, little mind games that you can play throughout your day to deal with certain things. What if a friend of mine calls, or what if somebody calls and I don't want to speak with them? What can I say by the time when they call, as opposed to waiting for their phone call, not being prepared, and then worrying about what to say? You're not as confident. So those what-if scenarios can help you strategically plan out for the best possible outcome. And those are some things. The other thing she says here is take control. In pressure moments, there are factors you have control over and factors you don't. That's good advice. There's always things we can't control, but when you focus on those uncontrollables, you end up intensifying the pressure, increasing your anxiety, and ultimately undermining your confidence. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about why some people thrive under stress and others don't. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins, your host of My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. If you're just joining us today, we're talking about choking under pressure. We're talking about why talented people are not able to perform under pressure. Talking about how that may indicate a value that we hold. It's so important to us that we're not able to perform. We're going through some examples of how to cope with loss in confidence and self-esteem. Also discussing tips to help you rebuild your confidence. We do have a weekly giveaway that is still active for this week. So if you send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com, that's talk@johnmhawkins.com. You can either say hi, or you can give us a tip or trick with regard to self-esteem and confidence, and you'll get entered in to win our weekly giveaway, which is a copy of Coach to Greatness and also a $25 Visa gift card. Right before the break, we were talking about 13 secrets to performing well under pressure. Well, do you wonder why some thrive and others wither under the stress? That's what we're going to be talking about in this segment. Got an article here by Julia Savakul, Why Some Thrive and Others Wither Under the Stress. She says here, if you're like most people, you think of resilience as the ability to bounce back from tragedy, a lost job, a serious illness, or a family death, and you may believe, as many people do, that resiliency is predetermined. It is something you have or you don't. But a new study indicates that not only is resilience necessary for succeeding in positive, stressful situations, such as a final round of a job interview or a championship match of some sort, it is a skill that can also be developed over time. I do want to add that we did a show on resiliency several weeks back, so if you're interested in that show, you can go to Spreaker and search for my name and that keyword resilience, and you should find it there. It says here, in a study conducted by Mustafa Sakar and David Fletcher in Britain and published in the Journal of Sports, Exercise, and Performance Psychology, 13 high-achieving individuals ranging from a variety of professions, including sports, business, politics, entertainment, were recruited to answer questions about how they deal with stress. After asking participants to recall challenging events in their careers, the researchers recorded the behaviors and beliefs that enabled the high achievers to overcome these obstacles, then compiled a list of shared qualities that help people thrive. It says here, just as victims of natural disasters or physical trauma show remarkable strength in rising above their circumstances, high achievers employ resilient tactics to thrive under a different sort of pressure. Resilience is a pivotal capacity not only for individuals reacting to potential traumatic events, but also for those who choose to operate in demanding environments. Even those trying to survive in today's tumultuous workplace can benefit from developing a greater sense of resilience. Another study in the Journal of Psychological Science found that people who scored higher in their career resiliency, the ability to go with the flow in an ever-changing workplace environments, went on to achieve greater success at their jobs and had a higher level of happiness. So what does this mean? I think it means that bad things are going to happen to good people all the time. And the sooner we start to develop skills like these top performers to be able to deal with those bad things, the better chance we have of coping with these ever-changing variables and workplace environments. And if we can cope with it, it puts us in a stronger position to take a stance and be a leader, as opposed to getting emotional or not dealing with that pressure in the right way. Among the variables that contribute to thriving under pressure, according to Sarkar and Fletcher, a proactive and positive personality. Proactive and positive personality. There's hope for me. A sense of flexibility and adaptability, feeling in control, having balance and perspective, and a perspective of social support. Certain characteristics are easier to cultivate than others. Those make sense to me. You know, if you're positive and you've got a good personality, If you have a sense of flexibility, you're not rigid, but you have the ability to go with the flow. You feel confident enough that you're in control of what you know and what you do, and have balance and perspective. Well, these seems like things we could all be working on. So some aspects of resiliency are very stable personality traits, and others are variable personality traits and social factors. Fletcher says in an interview, what this means is that resilience can be developed, but only so much. Rather than a single set point, we talk about resilience bandwidth, and it's up to people to do what they can to maximize their potential within their constraints. For instance, changing a pessimistic personality to a positive one is challenging, Fletcher says, but finding balance in your life, one of the traits the researchers found correlated with high resilience in high achievers, may be more a matter of practice and discipline. Similarly, you can expand your social network by joining more community organizations, or in some cases, doing a better job of befriending coworkers at your office. I think this is an important point here, because many times you'll talk to people and they'll say, well, I don't have that personality, or I can't do this because, I'm not a people person. And as a result of that, I'll never be able to do this, or I'm not good at presentations. That's the wrong attitude to take. What it says here is that we need to look at those personality traits that we can impact, the ones we can change, and focus on making those as best we can. And if we can compensate with developing those other skills, it could help and carry us along in times of stressful situations. I think this is just important from a personal development and life perspective. We're all different for a reason. If everybody was the same, how boring would this world be? And for us to be able to work together and learn to support each other is really what this is all about. It's helping each other with difficult situations. It's sharing our practices and teaching others how they can be successful in times that are challenging. Because that's where you're really going to get the most amount of satisfaction and fulfillment, is when you can help others be successful. And I think it's important to realize that there are some out there who are top of their game, have the ability to thrive, and they might just be good role models for you to look out for and follow what they're doing. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about developing your strategy. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very happy to be here with you today and really glad that you could join us. My Strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today's show, we're talking about choking under pressure, talking about how talented people sometimes are not able to perform under pressure. Talking about how we might need to develop some coping skills and ultimately building some tips and discussing tips and tricks so that you can build a strategy so that you are more confident when you are doing your activities. Right before the break, we were talking about why some people thrive and others wither under stress. The key point from the last segment was resiliency. And specifically, career resiliency is one of those things that gives people the ability to perform better in the workplace. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about creating your strategy. Now, when creating a strategy, I think about this in a systematic way. There's 5 different key components to creating a strategy. I've got awareness, assess and analyze, strategize and plan, implement your plan, and support and evaluate. So we're going to break this down with regard to, or in regard to, choking under pressure. So awareness. You've got a vision, you've got a goal, there's something you want to achieve. Is choking under pressure, not being able to perform, something that is impacting your ability to achieve your goal, to realize your vision? If it is, then that is something that you may want to consider working on from a personal development perspective. Assuming it is something we want to work on, the next step is to assess and analyze. By assessing a situation and doing some analysis, we can figure out which steps you can take. So from my perspective, if I'm working on a strategy so that I do not choke under pressure, I'm going to start to build and identify what are those things that are impacting me, or what is it an emotional decision that I'm making? Am I, do I fight when something doesn't go my way? Do I cry when something doesn't go my way? What is your response when put into a difficult situation? Were you not prepared? I think what you need to do is really start to go through and figure out your natural response. Because when you understand your natural responses, when you understand how you perceive it, but not only how you perceive the situation, but how others see you in that situation, it can start to open your mind to the possibility that there could be 2 different perspectives. We talked in one of our shows about perspective, so if you're interested in getting some more information on perspective, you can Google John M. Hawkins and perspective. But when you look at things from a different perspective, what you may see as a stressful situation may actually not be as stressful as you think it should be. And so by getting perspective, that gives us the ability to determine, or at least feel comfortable, that we can continue and perform under pressure without choking. So once we've identified what are some of those issues that we may be having, it's important for us to strategize and plan. Strategies include the course of actions. You can start by determining the ones that will help you get to. So what are the courses of actions that you've been working on? How much time have you been investing? What have you tried? What tactics? Let's say, for example, that you have an issue every time you're a golfer and you go out and you play golf. And when you're playing with friends, you have the ability to play no problem. You shoot low scores and everything is great. But then imagine that you're this great golfer when you get into a competitive situation and all of a sudden you're not able to perform. Why is that? It is the exact same person who was able to perform on Saturday with friends, but when it comes down to Thursday and they start the competitive matches, they're not able to perform. So we need to identify and see what are those situations. And when we get into those situations, what are the courses of actions that we're taking? There's some difference that's happening when you're with your buddies and playing versus when you're in the competitive situation. We talked a little bit earlier about, are you afraid of losing, or are you afraid of winning, or what is it that you are doing? And I think really starting to think about those strategies, those actions you're doing, and documenting them, capturing them, writing them down, knowing exactly what it is you are doing can help you determine what courses of actions you could change during a competitive round to help you perform better and not choke during that round. I mean, now, this isn't something that you're going to solve overnight. If you've been out there competing and you do well with friends, but you don't do well in a competitive situation, but you have to start trying. You can't just look at the situation and say, oh, I'm no good, I can't do this. No, you can do this. You have to identify what are some of those strategies that are going to help you in the time when you are trying to compete and trying to perform a specific task there. And I think we talked earlier about, one of these examples here of things where we can take control, create a pre-performance routine, really see things from a different perspective, share the pressure, slow down. Slow down is a great one. And slowing down helps in many aspects of our lives. Once you've done that, and you need to implement your plan. Truly implement those new courses of actions and capture and document what has worked, what hasn't worked. And time will kill the best laid plans. So you've got to make sure that there's a time element to this. If you are implementing new strategies, set goals, set time goals, not just, I'm going to try this next time, but figure out, can I solve this problem in 6 months, 3 months, 2 months? An active plan is going to give you a better chance of being successful, overcoming that performance anxiety, and keeping you from choking in those high-pressure situations. And, of course, the fifth element is support and evaluation. Do you have people who can help you? Do you have friends? And support and evaluation is so important because that is going to help you when you do run into tough times. And maybe in the situation where the golfer performed well on Saturdays, where they had their support and friends, was the reason they were successful. Whereas in a competitive situation, they didn't. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to help you put your plan in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and this is my strategy. Welcome back, everybody. So glad that you could be here with us today. Glad you could join us on this Saturday, or if you're listening to a pre-recorded broadcast, then glad to be with you as well. If you did miss this show, you can find us on iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes. You can find us on YouTube in the video format and also the audio format. And if you'd like to have something covered on the show, then send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com, or you can give us a call at 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 1-844-MY-STRATEGY. Today we've been talking about choking under pressure, talking about how talented people sometimes are not able to perform under pressure. Talked a little bit about how it perhaps could be our values system that was affecting our performance. We also talked about how you can cope with a sudden loss of confidence. We were talking about tips and tricks to help you build your confidence. We started off talking about don't choke. There was a story from Lolo Jones, who was an Olympic athlete in 2008, and she was competing. First in the race, she caught her shoe on one of the hurdles, and it sent her into a bit of an issue where she started to not performing as well as she could have. She ended up coming in 7th in that race. She fell to the ground, started crying, pounded her fists. And what was it that caused this top athlete not to be able to perform? Was it anxiety? Was it tensions? Was it afraid of losing? That's what we're talking about today. And in reality, every day we all have the ability to choke. We all have the ability to lose our confidence. We all have the ability to lose our self-esteem. But I think that even though we may at times choke or may at times lose our confidence, there are thousands of coping mechanisms that we can develop so that we can move on quickly and not let that small mishap change our vision, change where we want to go, keep us from fulfilling our objectives. You know, I think that's one of the things that as we're talking about coping with the sudden loss in confidence, it's important for us to feel self-confident. It's important for us to understand that we are going to feel anxious at times. But those strong feelings are not always your enemy. They are things that can help us understand ourselves better. And once we understand those emotions, it gives us the ability to make better decisions. We talked about things such as it's hard to perform under pressure. And in fact, nobody performs well under pressure. So there were some strategies and tactics we can use, like thinking of the pressure as fun, not as a challenge. Focus on the task, not the outcome. Slow down. Perfect practice, not just practice, makes perfect. We talked a little bit about why some thrive and others do not under stress, and resiliency was something that came up. In fact, career resiliency is something that gives us the ability to go with the flow in an ever-changing environment, and it is something that many employers want. And it all comes down to really having a systematic approach. We talked about our 5-step process. You don't have to go through every step every time you have a decision to make. But once you get some practice in going through the steps, it will become second nature. And you'll be able to make those decisions, strategic decisions, more easily because you have had that perfect practice practicing your development of strategy. But keep in mind that breaking of habits is difficult. We have to be aware of those patterns. It comes down to being able to consciously prioritize what we're doing and also our time. And clarity helps. And coaching can help you with clarity. You've been listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. That's all the time we have for today, so we'll see you next time.